First, the headlines. The Sultanate expresses its condolences and sympathy to the Republic of Greece on the victims of the forest fires. The Ministry of Labor continues conducting employment tests and interviews for the job seekers in the governorate of the FAR. And Israel military strikes Hamas in Gaza Strip after launch of fire balloons. Those were the headlines. Now for the news in detail. In a statement issued by the Foreign Ministry today, the Sultanate expressed its condolences and sympathy to the government and the people of the Friendly Republic of Greece and to the families of the victims in the forest fires in several regions and wished a speedy recovery to the injured. His Excellency Sayyid Badr bin Hamad bin Ahmoud al-Busaidi, the Foreign Minister, welcomed the appointment of the Swedish ambassador to Yemen, Hans Grundberg, as the UN Special Envoy for Yemen by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, to succeed Ambassador Martin Griffiths and the Sultanate's aspiration to work with him in this important file and to continue efforts to resolve the Yemeni crisis as soon as possible. His Excellency the Foreign Minister valued the UN envoy Grundberg's march and knowledge of Yemen and the region's affairs, expressing his aspiration that his professional experience would contribute to the efforts exerted to secure a comprehensive and lasting ceasefire by all parties, in addition to facilitate the flow of humanitarian aids and to enter into a political process that achieves the aspiration of the Yemeni people towards security and stability, besides national unity and reconstruction. The Ministry of Labor is continuing the employment of job seekers in the governorate of the FAR. Some 334 male and female citizens from the governorate had conducted tests and interviews to compete to occupy some job opportunities in the government bodies at the levels of bachelor, higher diploma, and general education diploma. The tests were carried out through electronic system. The applicants will be assessed electronically and the results will appear immediately after the test and interviews. The system was made by a specialist from Sultan Qaboos University. The Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation has introduced a new program as part of the internal scholarship programs under the name Internal Partial Scholarships Program for the General Diploma for all students. The Ministry will bear 50% of the academic fees of the scholarship program for diploma degree only, while the student parent will pay the rest of the academic fees and other fees as well. The Ministry introduced this program in order to increase and diversify the opportunities for larger segment of students to get academic seats at different private higher education institutions in the Sultanate. The military said Israeli warplanes have struck 2 targets in the Gaza Strip in response to incendiary balloons launched from Gaza into Israel. The Israeli military today struck what it said was a Hamas military compound and a rocket launching site after 4 incendiary balloons were launched into Israel, setting fire and land and damaging agriculture. There were no reports of casualties in Israel nor Gaza. The Israeli media reported that 4 fires caused by incendiary balloons broke out yesterday afternoon in areas close to the Gaza Strip. The U.S. is now averaging 100,000 new COVID-19 infections daily, returning to a milestone last seen during the winter surge, in yet another bleak reminder of how quickly the Delta variant has spread throughout the country. The U.S. was averaging about 11,000 cases a day in late June. Now the number is 107,143. It took the U.S. about 9 months to cross the 100,000 average case number in November before peaking at about 250,000 in early January. Cases bottomed out in June but took about 6 weeks to go back above 100,000, despite a vaccine that has been given to more than 70% of the adult population. The virus is spreading quickly through unvaccinated populations, especially in the South, where hospitals have been overrun with patients. Australia's state of New South Wales reported another record day of COVID-19 cases today, as authorities in the country's second city of Melbourne rushed to trace the source of the outbreaks. Australia's 3 largest cities were in lockdown today, as New South Wales recorded 319 community cases of the virus and 5 more deaths, a third straight day of record case numbers. With the virus continuing to spread through Sydney's sprawling suburbs, despite the city heading into its 7th week of lockdown, State Health Minister Brad Hazzard expressed frustration that people appeared to be ignoring restrictions and urged residents to stay at home. Mexico City and half a dozen of the country's 32 states are now on a red alert as COVID-19 infections rose to their highest level ever. As of yesterday, Mexico had over 144,000 active coronavirus cases nationwide, 4.6% more than the previous peak during the country's surge in January. The country has seen 243,733 test-confirmed deaths, but the country does little testing and studies of the death certificates, indicating the real toll is nearly 370,000. Nearly a quarter of the country is now on the highest level of alert, which requires some non-essential businesses to close and forces others to serve fewer customers at a time. Hospitals across Mexico are now at 51% of capacity. Mexico has vaccinated 48 million people, or about 38% of the total population, with at least 1 dose. Still to come on News Bulletin. An unlikely group got together to form the first rock band in Gaza. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. The total foreign assets at the Central Bank of Oman increased at the end of last May by 10.4% as to reach around 6,945,000,000 Omani riyals. The National Center for Statistics and Information said that the private sector deposits at commercial banks and Islamic windows in the Sultanate rose by 7.4%, as to reach more than 17,336,000,000 riyals, compared to 17,147,000,000 riyals for the same period in 2020. The volume of local liquidity amounted to 1,240,000,000 riyals, with an increase of 6.5% during last May. The number of passengers traveling through the Sultanate's airport during the first half of year 2021 decreased by 45.82%, bringing their number to 1.6 million passengers compared to the same period in 2020. Data issued by the National Center for Statistics and Information indicate that the number of flight movements through the Sultanate Airport reached 15,874 by the end of June, including 11,411 international flights, 4,463 domestic flights. The raging wildfires in Greece have killed a volunteer firefighter in a blaze threatening Athens' most important national park. But there may be some hope as the country endures its most intense heat wave in 30 years. More than 1,000 people were evacuated by ferries from a seaside village and beaches on Evia, an island of rugged forested mountains popular with holiday makers and campers after flames from a massive wildfire burning days cut off all other means of escape. Greece's firefighting forces have been stretched to the limit. The government has appealed for help through the European Union's emergency support system, and firefighters and aircraft have arrived from France, Ukraine, Cyprus, Croatia, Sweden, and Israel, with more expected to arrive from Romania and Switzerland. NASA's Mars rover Perseverance has failed in its first attempt to grab rock samples on Mars for future return to Earth. The car-sized Perseverance landed inside the red planet Jezero crater this past February with an objective to search for signs of ancient microbial life. The rover carries 43 titanium sample tubes and is exploring Jezero crater, where it will be gathering samples of rock and regolith, broken rock and dust for future analysis on Earth. The Perseverance mission is assembling a response team to analyze the data. One early step will be to use the Watson wide-angle topographic sensor for operations and engineering imager located at the end of the robotic arm to take close-up pictures of the borehole. Once the team has a better understanding of what happened, it will be able to ascertain when to schedule the next sample collection attempt. An accountant, 2 lawyers, and an agronomist and a Swiss humanitarian worker have formed Gaza's first rock band, giving voice in English to the pain of war in the Palestinian territory. The unlikely group got together more than 2 years ago to create Osprey V, posting video clips online and projecting an aura of mystery by keeping their faces hidden. Now the band is ready to step into the limelight with songs steeped in emotions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In April, a month before an 11-day war between Gaza and Israel, they performed in Live for Gaza, an online concert to raise funds for musicians in the Palestinian territories. Pro-Palestinian activist Roger Waters of Pink Floyd also took part. The band's songwriter Mu'min Al-Jaru said Osprey V wants to convey both a universal message and one unique to Gaza, run by the Hamas group since 2007. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's news bulletin, here are the main points once again. The Sultanate expresses its condolences and sympathy to the Republic of Greece on the victims of the forest fires. The Ministry of Labor continues conducting employment tests and interviews for the job seekers in the governorate of Dhofar. And Israel military strikes Hamas in the Gaza Strip after launch of fire balloons. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios is good night and stay safe.